This is fucking
Regret
stupid.
is not likely to set in within the first year, though it very well might. Usually it takes longer. And you'll notice that many of these studies, they stop doing the follow-ups with the patients at precisely the moment when the regret might really start setting in.
So, oh yeah, that's right. Oh, I get to, ooh, I'm excited. We get Mr. Peanut to join us. Oh, I'm excited. Okay. Anyway. How loud is this gonna be? It's gonna be like super
Today
loud.
we cancel someone named Hunter Avalone. He's apparently a YouTuber
like
and Twitch streamer with a moderately large following, though I'd never heard of him.
Am I crazy?
It came to my attention thanks to a clip posted to Twitter by Addison Smith of OAN. Now, what came to my attention is that Hunter posted a lengthy video to his YouTube channel reacting to my testimony in front of the Tennessee House Committee about their now passed legislation banning child gender transitions.
570
Hunter
followers.
Is
okay,
apparently
or 570,000.
Child castration. He's a fierce advocate of castrating children.
I too despise the Daily
And so,
Wire.
as we'll see, he doesn't like me very much. Here's the clip that was on Twitter. It's very short. Check it out.
See.
Adolescent children.
Pull chat down.
As far as surgeries, you know,
Wait, giving kids the puberty blockers after they've been confirmed gender dysphoric and they've consented and their therapists have consented and their doctors have consented and their parents have consented.
True.
And they've been persistent in gender dysphoria for a minimum of 6 months. Yeah, that's actually a good thing, Matt.
Oh, 6 whole months, you say? Well,
despise
we all know that no child
You like
outgrow a
Candace?
phase after 6 months. 6 months is when it's set in stone.
Should I like find a Candace
video? I have never
video?
seen my own kids be interested in something or go through a phase that lasts 6 whole months. I mean, 6 months, this is their identity now. Might as well chemically castrate them, right? What else are we supposed to do? I mean, we could do exactly what we had already been doing for all of human history up until 18 seconds ago. We could just let kids go through their phases, let them grow out of it, instead of locking them in place and turning an awkward moment into a lifelong identity crisis. We could do that. But before we get too far in addressing Hunter's points, we should be fair and get the entire context. I had a little bit of a back and forth with him on Twitter yesterday where he fleshed out his argument, such as it is. He explained that children can consent to these, quote, treatments because the parents and doctors also consent. I asked...
Wait, that's not how that works exactly. Kids consent to medical treatment all the time. Now, they do not have the ability to be the sole consenting party, usually. But generally, there is an age of consent for children, specifically for medical practices.
Well, how does the consent of the adult somehow validate the consent of the child? In other words,
what is
if
that?
a child
Wait,
cannot
what?
consent to making permanent life-altering decisions, how does the consent of the adult around the child change that? And he responded that he's only talking about...
Wait. Kids all the time consent to life-altering... Like, what is life-altering changes? There's like any number of medical practices that are life-altering. Some of them include giving you medicine so you don't die. But like, we wouldn't call that life-altering. Like, like kids break arms. It would be life-altering to not have your arm reset. That is true. Like, okay.
Puberty blockers, not the cross-sex hormones or surgeries. In fact, you clarified that hormones and surgeries should wait until the child turns 18, according to, in his opinion. But puberty blockers are different because they are a life-saving medical intervention, he claimed.
Not to bud, or is it no to bud? Have I been reading that wrong? There is a space in between those. It's no to bud. I'm sorry. What's weird about it?
He also noted that I am an ape and I should go F myself.
Oh, that's so true.
When I asked how it could ever be appropriate to chemically castrate a child, which is what the puberty blocker does.
Nope, doesn't do it.
Quote, firstly, too much Tylenol can kill you.
Notorious.
Puberty blockers
I like that.
Can be
That's
detrimental if given in large doses, but beneficial when given in proper doses. Why is this so hard for your chimp brain to grasp? Medicine can be good. Too much medicine can be bad. He later insisted again, smaller doses of puberty blockers are not chemical castration. I'm fine with puberty blockers for minors. Surgery and hormones shouldn't be given until unless 18 years or older.
Yeah.
Go back to being the creepy dude hanging outside the high school, you degenerate scum.
He did have a video. Yeah. God damn, Hunter. Ether the man. Strange to me.
I had to ask about 3 or 4 times for any
What's strange
evidence
about
that
it?
puberty blockers are life-saving, as he claimed. And finally, after furiously Googling for whatever random studies he could find, but certainly not read, he responded, quote, "Sure, I've attached some evidence below. Since you're too retarded to read yourself, firstly,
Dude,
here's a cohort of trans
dropping the
people over 40 plus years showing
R
that no increase of suicide was present after transition. Although the suicide risk remained higher, this was due to social issues, not transition.
Damn.
Secondly, here's a study which found that puberty suppression and affirmation care was correlated with a 70% decrease in suicidal thoughts.
I think I remember
So again,
that reading.
go
I
F
think I remember
yourself,
bringing
you
that one up
pathetic ape man.
with the dude who came on the
Okay,
other
so-
day.
Now everyone's up to speed. A few points, Hunter. First of all, you appear to be about 13 years old, but as far as I know, you're actually a full-grown man, technically, which means that you should understand by now that a weak argument doesn't become strong just by tacking an insult onto the end of it. Actually, that makes your
That
weak
is a complete lie. Only good arguments, all good arguments have an insult in them. Mainly because you are insulting the other person's intelligence. If I give you a study and say this study refutes your claim, that's good. But if I slam down a study in your face, in front of your wife, and call you a dumb fuck, that is way better. That is way better. Especially if I go on to fuck your wife because you're a cuck, like Matt Walsh.
argument look even weaker. And it makes you look like a child in the process. And this is a special problem for you since you already look like a child.
Ah, yes.
And if
the
you
pedo,
are going to go the insult
pedo
route,
would
you
know
probably
what
don't
children
wanna
look
throw
like.
terms like degenerate around. Remember, you're the one in this conversation passionately defending the right of a doctor to give a child the same drug they use to chemically castrate sex offenders. I'm on the anti-child castration side of
He
discussion.
does realize that we also give ibuprofen to sex offenders when they have migraines, right? Like, that's not an argument. We use the same drugs to treat the same symptoms, regardless of whether you're a murderer, pedophile, a fucking Sacagawea, or a Mother Teresa. It doesn't matter. You're going to be given the same fucking drugs to alleviate your migraine, regardless. That's not a strong argument, dipshit.
You're on the pro side. So you're free to stake out that ground if you want, but you are unfortunately precluded from ever calling
Will Matt
anyone
Walsh
else
ever debate
degenerate
somebody? I don't
ever
think he
again
will.
in
He
your
really
entire
shouldn't.
life.
He got
Second,
upended.
I'm
He got
afraid
like
that I'm
fucking
not
blown the fuck out
impressed the
by
ability to
Joe
Google
Rogan.
a study that confirms whatever conclusion you
My
already
God,
landed
you
on, and
found
fling it at the other
evidence.
side after briefly skimming the abstract.
My God.
It's not how you win an argument. You don't just go to Google, studies that confirm what I already believed. Oh, here's one. See?
So what do you do, Matt? Do you just continue to talk emptily about the topic? Because, like, again, Hunter gave you 2 studies that, like, refute your claim, and only somebody who doesn't give a shit about evidence, somebody who doesn't give a shit about outcome, somebody who doesn't give a shit about anything they say because they're motivated by their emotions, by their feelings, would immediately just throw out clear and obvious evidence that they're incorrect. There's a reason why I have my misgivings with Hunter on certain topics, but, like, at the end of the day, if your entire argument if your entire counter to, oh, you brought evidence, well, you just typed in that you just went looking for evidence that proved your claim that you were already familiar with. What are you gonna do now, liberal? What if I show you a study that, by the way, doesn't exist, that disagrees with your summation, sir? But, like, you know, you can't do that. You know, he's not gonna be able to. He'll find, like, random data points and do his own like, analysis of those. But by no means is that analysis scientific or objective. But I don't think kids should do any drugs, but I think all the plastics, pollutions, hormone emitters, oh my God, that's a word, we have in our environment is going to cause issues with the endocrine system, and could easily lead to, as Alex Jones would put it, They're turning the friggin' frogs gay. So okay. So when we talk about drugs, like we do quite like kids are given Tylenol, any kind of like I'm trying to think of like all the drugs like Mucinex and any of this stuff. Kids, there are like instructions for like if under what is it? It's like usually 12 and under, or like 12. I think it's like usually 12 or older, and then it's like 4 and under, and or whatever those numbers might be. Go to any like drug facts like on your jar of Tylenol or whatever the fuck. And there's usually like 4 adults, 4 children, and there's like dosages and also time frames that you take them in. That's all that we're really talking about. Like in terms of drugs, I'm not like a fan of the way that we develop and the way that we commodify drugs in the US, but by no means have I ever seen that like any of the actual usage has led to anything, just because they're privately held. As much as I have my issues with the private pharmaceutical companies, the actual science and the actual like development of the drugs, I am less skeptical of. It's the business side of it and the motivations behind that business side that I have issues with. In terms of turning the freaking frogs gay, unfortunately, there's just no real evidence to say that like as a good example, we know that lead paint causes I could be wrong, but I believe it's swelling in the brain that can lead to an increase in violent tendencies. And the way we found that out is through studying some of the like the brains or the activity of people who lived around and in environments that were surrounded by lead paint. We understand the effects of lead paint on people who live in that environment. I'm right above me, there's lead paint right up there. Maybe that's why I yell on the internet so much. But like we already see that there's really no version of that for turning the frogs gay or the humans gay. Like I would agree that the plastics and all the rest of that stuff certainly has had an influence over like the the ecological health of the American people, but by no means does any of this push you towards like sexual orientation at all. Apparently for an infection is way different than hijacking the endocrine system for potentially a lifetime. I mean, potentially is doing a lot of work there. People take antidepressants. Those don't last forever. They do have a window of effect and how long that they're going to stay and have an effect on your brain chemistry. Lead in the gasoline was a big one. Yeah, that too. That's a good example. Fucking didn't the other dude mention fucking fluoride? That MK Ultra shit. Transition hormones though. Are you on that for life? No. Or the majority of it. If you transition with hormones though you are on that for life? No. I mean, you can not take hormones at any point. You can stop taking hormones. Now, usually if you're the process of detransitioning is complicated, but like if you are to put it kind of in a very simple terms, if you are 9 and you go on puberty blockers because you're not sure if you would like to continue developing as a boy or into a man, or if you would be more comfortable developing into a girl and then into a woman, right? You go on puberty blockers at 9. Maybe you make the decision at 10 that, oh, actually, I would like to pursue, growing into a woman. And, maybe at 12, you decide, actually, this isn't really for me. Now, the way that you would like get them to the puberty that they want is you'd put them on, There are sounds outside my window. I think it's a dog. You would put them on like estrogen for that like 2-year span while they're like trying to develop as a woman, or into a woman, I should say. And you know, if they're like actually JK, or like, you know, it's not really for me, whatever that is, they simply go off of them. Usually you'd probably have to go on testosterone for a little bit to catch you up, but then eventually you'd get off of all of them and just develop normally. These are rather like the hormone stuff is like rather malleable if done at a certain time frame, or at a certain like age, basically. Let's see. If you transition, majority of it. Yeah, okay to me if you can make a decision. Yeah, like a lot of people, the problem I have with like I had somebody on what was that, Monday? On Monday I talked with a UK person, with a Brit about this, and their issue was like, oh well, like trans affirming care pushes people down the path of becoming trans, when the actual, and like part of his hang up was around like puberty blockers, and like Matt Walsh describes puberty blockers as chemical castration. They're not. They simply pause your puberty until you can make that decision for yourself as to which direction you want to go, puberty wise, I suppose. We have them and we develop them for intersex people who, you know, might have, who might be somewhere in the middle, and kind of for them to make that decision. I remember there's like a I don't know if you're American, but like there's an episode of House. It's like a doctor show or whatever, but it's like but they had like an episode on it where like the kid was like intersex, but his parents, I believe, put him on Canadian, right? His parents put him on testosterone because they wanted a son, right? But he grew into being kind of more of a feminine boy who was more into boys, and like through the course of the show, they didn't initially tell him that information, and he was like sick with some kind of specific disease thing that led to this or that. Like they get around to the point of discovering actually this young boy was intersex. He wasn't aware of this because the parents never told him that, but he was starting to like kind of wonder, like, why am I into girl things? Like, why do I feel like a girl in some kind of way? And that's what we developed. And for those people, is kind of what we developed the hormone blockers, and then the hormones for, amongst other things. There's also just women who don't develop, and like girls and boys who don't develop, and even women and men who are having developmental issues, and you give them those to kind of basically boost their secondary sex characteristics usually. But yeah, it's just so people can make the decision for themselves. No kids are like are getting on hormone blockers on 9, trans, becoming a girl at 10 and getting the surgeries at 11. That's just not happening. And if it is, it's like incredibly marginal. And even in like most surgeries that like, maybe if it's like breast reduction surgery, even if it's happening for a girl that might be 11, like most likely that's because they want to avoid like back issues and health complications in the future. It's not like exclusively for trans people, but or even possibly trans people. Agent Cavaldra. I mean, I wouldn't be mad at bringing the voting age down. I think 16 is a more reasonable voting age. Trains me that everyone going to the wall with that. Sitting here like guys, what about inflation, the war, and you get crickets? Yeah, yeah. You're not wrong. Unfortunately, like it's like one of those things where like would I appreciate a populace, a like voting like populace that was more interested in inflation and in the war stuff? Like I would appreciate people be more interested in substantive issues, but like unfortunately the way politics plays out is you kind of have to play to the crowd, and you got to play to what people are talking about. You have to meet people where they are politically, and it's why I cover so much of specifically the trans issue. I don't know how many segments I've done, like quite a few, and like I've talked it with a few people about the topic, and it's just because these are civil rights, these are really important things that like before now we didn't have to have constant debates over. You know, but these are people's rights. They are important, but I get what you mean in that, like, trans people have been around for quite a long time. We haven't had a problem. Suddenly it's an issue, and it'll probably die down a bit after the elections, is my prediction. But it doesn't mean that, like, the efforts to take people's rights away aren't worth spending time on. You know, and people like this, you know, he's got a following. He's 2 million followers, very popular, very all those things. And you know, I get on here because I want to advocate for a world that I want to see. And right now the debate is unfortunately trans people. I don't know, I don't gotta like it, but you know, that's the moment we're in. So it's what I discuss.
The problem with the study food fight is that two can always play at that game, and in this case, I can play it better. I have, for example, the most thorough study ever conducted on this subject, which spanned 30 years and found that suicidality is highest for trans people 10 to 15 years after medical transition. Highest. You, on the other hand, have one.
Wait a minute, Matt. But you're also not. Also not illuminating what the reasons for that was. Hunter already linked a study that said while suicide is still high amongst the trans community as adults, the reasoning is social and not personal. Like, the reason is not for their transition. The reason is for people like Matt Walsh. The solution here is to eliminate Matt Walsh.
One study that focuses on people who transitioned as adults, not as children, and which, according to you, found that there was no increase in suicide rate. Not that there was a notable decrease, but that there was no increase. And that the suicide rate was still much higher than the general population. Now, you blithely declare that this higher rate of suicide was due to, quote, social issues, not the transition, because what? You somehow know why all these people killed themselves? How do you know that?
Funny, Matt, you could actually probably get a study to find out about that. It's called suicidal ideation. If you can show that a group of people are at a higher risk of committing suicide, then you can extrapolate that number based on the reasons why they're giving. Crazy thought.
Well, I mean, you made it up, of course. And whatever the reason for the suicides, the fact remains.
Whatever the reason, we don't need to explain it.
The suicide rate is still very high.
And why could that be?
And so that would seem to be a pretty good indication.
Tell me
that
why.
The transition
Tell
meant
me
to
why.
prevent that
Tell
outcome
me why. Tell
failed
me
to
why.
prevent it.
Tell me why.
And this is a study
why.
you provided to prove your point. You know, people are raving about Genucell.
What the fuck? We're really doing a thing right now? We're just doing an ad. Okay. Wow, that was...
Give another study which claims these findings.
Okay.
You also give another study which claims these findings, and I'm reading now. Quote, in this prospective cohort of 104 trans and non-binary youths aged 13 to 20 years, receipt of gender-affirming care, including puberty blockers and gender-affirming hormones, was associated with 60% lower odds of moderate or severe depression and 73% lower odds of suicidality. Okay, well, at least this one pretends to actually prove your point rather than directly refuting it like the other one. But
didn't happen.
Do you know anything else about this study?
Waving at a imaginary
How was it conducted?
group.
How did they find their study subjects?
Yes, the classic.
How did the
you found a study that reinforces your claim.
You understand how
no, it doesn't count.
Unreliable self-reported data is? How do they quantify suicidal thoughts? A 70% decrease in suicidal thoughts. How do you quantify that to begin with?
Wait, but nobody says. Does Matt think that people are like, they ask people, are you depressed? And they go, I'm about 70% less depressed. No, it's an average because they're most likely answering questions on like a scale of like how depressed they are or a frequency of how often. You would just need a control group to get a starting point and then ask them where they are now in the future, like, you know, however many months or years down the road. It's not really hard, Matt.
Of course, you haven't considered any of this, but it doesn't really matter because there's a fatal problem here. Well, there's a lot, but let's just focus on one. And it's the same one shared by nearly every study claiming to prove that gender-affirming care has positive results. The problem is this.
There's too many overwhelming
And you would know this
studies.
if you read the thing that you Googled. which next time you should think about doing that.
Yes. Hit
The
me with it,
results are
Matt.
based on a 12-month follow-up. Okay, they report that these kids, 12 months after beginning the transition,
Yes.
say that they feel better.
So a year.
You know what that tells us?
Uh-huh.
You know what it proves? Absolutely nothing. Not one.
Yes. You have a piece of evidence. It means nothing because I don't think it does.
One single thing. I am not surprised that kids who have been told that transition will solve their problems would then report shortly afterwards that it has indeed solved their problems. If you gave a 13-year-old a really ugly tattoo, it's pretty certain that he'd still think it was cool.
So I'm assuming you're talking about COVID there. You know, the COVID stuff. The problem with the COVID stuff is you have an intersection between like personal health and like social policy or like you know, the social prescription for healthcare, which I think there's always going to be those compromises and those kind of what's the word, like what you would prescribe or what you would think you know, will work for like one person is not really what you want for your entire society. Like for natural immunity, if I remember correctly, I want to say it was Sweden. I could be wrong about this, but did Sweden not do basically anything in terms of lockdowns, in terms of you know, in terms of masking? Basically, they came to the conclusion that they were like, you know, we'll just let everybody get it. Like some people will get sick, everyone will get like, you know, that little boost of immunity, call it a day. Yeah. If I remember correctly, yeah. Sweden took a really laissez-faire approach to COVID. And while in the beginning, things seemed to be doing kind of all right, their mortality rate, if I remember correctly, they did have a pretty shocking rise in mortality or like severe outcomes for people. Another thing also is we need to think about long COVID, where like letting everybody get like naturally immune is all well and good, like that's fine, but the effects of long COVID and the long-term effects is also something you have to weigh, because like there are people who got COVID in 2020 and are still living with coughs, still living with inflammation, still living with some of the effects, and might be living with those effects for the rest of their life because of that. And if we had let that spread to everybody, there's a chance we could be looking at like basically a cliff where like, you know, 10, 20 years down the road, we start to see people just fucking drop off because of these respiratory problems. So there's also that. Like weighing public policy with health policy is a balancing act. I don't want to get into super specifics because like I'm not a scientist, but like it is something that's not as easy as I think people make it out to be. You know, you can understand something while still having to come to the compromise of, sure, like I think just let everybody get sick. Like I'm a person who like firmly believes in go outside, play in the fucking mud, scratch your arm, get some dirt in it, fucking let your immune system like understand how to fight that stuff. Like I understand that for me, like that to me always makes sense. But for an entire country and for a populace of like millions, or you know, we're talking just you need a different kind of approach, I think. I'm an RN, I'll never work in medical. It was voluntary RN, unashamed. Is that a registered nurse, right? One of my best friends, he works in the ER. He always has horror stories for me, always, and he always tells me how shit the fucking industry is right now, how much they're putting on people. The like, he always complains about the basically like, I don't know if he's not technically a nurse, but like the nurse to patient or the patient to because he's not a nurse. I don't know what the fuck he is. He's like an ER. I actually don't know what the fuck his actual position is, but yeah, like the ratio of like, you know, how many people one nurse or one worker in a hospital has to watch over is like dangerously high. Might be a tech. Yeah, he might be a tech, I think.
Cool when he's 14. And if the 13-year-old gets a tattoo,
yeah, because I think he was trying to get like his
tattoo
license or whatever to get to be on like ambulances.
Say, well, look, see, it turns out getting the tattoo was a good idea. He's 14 and he still likes it. The question is not how the 13-year-old feels at 14.
Can 13-year-olds get tattoos?
The question is how will he feel
Isn't it
5
only
years,
with
from
parental consent?
10 years.
I
20
actually
years.
like, as far as I know,
How
getting a
does the
tattoo
adult
isn't like
version of the
dangerous.
same child feel now that he has to live with the consequences of decisions that he made as a child?
This is fucking
Regret
stupid.
is not likely to set in within the first year, though it very well might. Usually it takes longer, and you'll notice that many of these studies, they stop doing the follow-ups with the patients at precisely the moment when the regret might really start setting in.
Wait, but Matt. When is that precise moment? You can't use this argument. Like you're not saying anything. You're just saying we can't let kids transition at 15, which they're not. But we can't let them transition at 15 because at 16 they might, because at 17 they might. Oh well, they actually didn't start feeling regret. Oh well, they said at 17 that they were fine. Oh well, you can't let them transition at 15 because they might. This is a never-ending argument. Like he will always just push it back to like they're gonna regret it next year. They're gonna regret it the next year. They're gonna regret it the year after that, and after that, and the next one, and the next year, and the next year. Like that's all he's arguing. He doesn't actually have any data. He doesn't actually have any basis for any of this. He's just like waving at like they were about to regret it, but then they stop asking them, which all right, cool. If you can show me the rate of detransition, I would love to see it, but the rate of detransition is like lower than 10% because the rate of regret with trans youth and trans adults is below, I think it's like 8% is like the regret rate, which is lower than the rates of regret for most elective surgeries, if not all elective surgeries, basically. So like he has no leg to fucking stand on. He's just doing feelings over facts on this one.
What we need are long-term follow-ups with
This
people
is
who
true.
transition
Matt does
as
not want
children. But as I'm
anybody to
constantly having
transition.
to explain, there aren't any reliable studies like that
Not sure
because
they
we just started doing this to
Was that
children
planned?
on this scale very recently.
No,
So
it was
these
not
kids are the
planned.
test case.
I live in
They are the guinea
Colorado,
pigs.
so they gave me when
But
I
anyway,
moved
you never
here.
answered my question. I asked
They
for
gave me
evidence
a
that
plaid
puberty
shirt
blockers
with
are
my
life-saving.
license.
You shouldn't need a survey to tell me
My
that.
union talking
It should be a
about
relatively
stuff.
easy thing to quantify. There was no such thing as a puberty blocker until recently.
My union talking about woke stuff. Yeah, this is also the thing. I really hate when unions get too bogged down with like a lot of this sort of stuff, and like it's always like, can we put like unions need to focus hard on economics. Like there is a place for like social policy, but like you're lucky you have a union. Us in the US, we don't even have that. So like be thankful you have at least something. Here in the US, like my friend is completely fucked. They're losing nurses left and right because they're all just piecing out because they're sick and tired of being overworked by the hospital.
And if these blockers are life-saving medications, then that would mean that billions of children lived at a time historically.
They're not life-saving.
when
They're
the
only life-saving if
medication
you have
was not
gender
available to
dysphoria.
them. And that would mean that a great many children died because they didn't have access to it. Okay,
I stand with you in your
give me some
negotiations.
examples. Who died due to a lack of access to this life-saving drug? You're saying
Is he talking about hormone blockers aren't life-saving, you idiot? Like they don't do anything, but oh my god, I'm not getting
it's
into this
life-saving.
again.
That should mean that many, many children have died because they didn't have access to it. So can you give me some examples? How many children died because there were no puberty blockers available?
Not all kids need
We
puberty
should be able to
blockers.
see in history
It's only
this
trans
enormous
kids.
wave of child deaths due to a lack of chemical castration. Do we?
This is the
I mean,
dumbest
I could quite
take
easily
ever.
point to deaths that happened because penicillin hadn't been invented yet, for example.
Well, yes, because penicillin was developed to, if I remember correctly, it's for infections. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, that's for infections. Same with the polio vaccine. That was also developed, because he has nothing. Because all he can do is politically, is lie and politically frame things in the worst possible way. But puberty blockers, you will not live or die based on them. If you have gender dysphoria, you have a higher chance of not committing suicide because your body's not going to be developing in a direction that you would not like to see it. But you could, I never went on puberty blockers and I survived. because that's not what they're for. That's like being like, you know, kids don't get headaches. What do you mean? Kids never have gotten headaches. We don't need to give them like, you know, fucking ibuprofen. Like, what is this? Like, I don't.
So where are the historical
Puberty
deaths that we
blockers.
can pin on a lack of puberty blockers?
Well, the thing is
This is
most
a life-saving drug.
psychologists
Isn't that what you said?
then go
Where's the
on
historical
to
evidence?
recommend puberty
you have
blockers
even a
to the
single
kids
shred
who
of it?
need them. Not everyone needs them.
No, of course you don't. Now, it is interesting, though, that
Crash
you
Zero,
can't-
what is he saying then? Please illuminate what he is saying, because what he is arguing is that puberty blockers are life-saving drugs, which they're not, and that without them, kids would die, which they wouldn't. Only a specific subsect of kids have a higher propensity to commit suicide. Those kids being ones with gender dysphoria. So please illuminate for me what he is saying. Please, by all means. I prefer psychotherapy with puberty blockers. Yeah. The puberty blockers usually get prescribed by a psychiatrist. I never know the difference. Whichever one gives you drugs, that's the one. Usually you go to like a psychologist to get assessed, and then a psychiatrist for a follow-up, and then, you know, you get puberty blockers if they think that's right for you. But that's after like a bunch of sessions. He's arguing that kids in the past did not die for lack thereof. So wait. So you're telling me. Okay. So if that's what he is saying that there have been no children who commit suicide, who have gender dysphoria, who commit suicide. Are you saying that's true? Is he saying that's true? Because we have evidence to say that that's incorrect. That is absolutely not true. I will wait. I'm not saying what is true objectively. Then what are you saying? I want to know about objective reality. This is the problem I have with Matt Walsh. As much as I love his honesty in terms of living, owning his fascism, I need to know what's the reality of this, because the reality is that kids with gender dysphoria have a higher propensity for suicide. And we've found that puberty blockers help alleviate that, because the problem that they're having is they don't feel comfortable growing into the gender role that they're currently growing into. Puberty blockers pauses that until they either A, feel comfortable in that role, or B, decide to transition into the opposite role, to which then their doctors, their psychologists, their psychiatrists, their parents, their family figure out the best path forward. Those are the two ways this works out. So what is Matt trying to say? Okay. Anyway, how much time we got left on this thing? 3 minutes. Cool. Let's get going.
Bring yourself to endorse cross-sex hormones and surgeries for minors. At first blush,
Doesn't happen.
This would seem to make you slightly more reasonable than the other child sexual mutilation advocates. But upon further evaluation, it actually makes your position even more incoherent, if that's possible. After all, the very medical establishment that you trust implicitly when it comes to puberty blockers also says that hormones and surgeries can be life-saving medical interventions for children. So why do you trust them on the blockers, but not on the hormones and surgeries? If they're lying, or let's be very generous, catastrophically mistaken about the latter two, doesn't it stand to reason that the same would apply to the first?
None of this is coherent.
Blockers, hormone surgeries, they're all part of the same process of medical, quote, affirmation. What you're saying is that you agree with step 1, but you think they're wrong about steps 2 and 3. This might not be an insurmountable logical problem.
I am so confused what the fuck he's talking about. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. How did he get from point A to point B? I don't.
You can't bring yourself to endorse cross-sex hormones and surgeries for minors. At first blush, this would seem...
Okay. So cross-sex hormones for minors, right? So in terms of minors, the definition, the medical term for minors is different from the legal term. Minors, when we talk about like legally, people who can vote, people who are considered adults, is 18. Minors in terms of medical decisions, lower than that. I think I've already said that, but let's also be clear. Secondly, if those are the things, this is probably where I break from Hunter on this, in this case, in that hormone therapy, no problem with. In terms of like these surgeries, if it's like, if the doctors and if the families and if the person we're talking about comes to the conclusion that that is what they need, then sure, I got no problem with that. Do I think that's going to be likely? Not really, because kids usually aren't going to be that gung-ho or ready to undertake such an extreme, such a big step. Like I would presume most families will agree at 18 is when they make the final decision to do like bottom or top surgery, or they just stay socially and like 80% of the way transitioned, which also a lot of people do. There are a lot of trans people who are adults who don't necessarily get like bottom surgery. Like, not everyone does everything. Some people do some stuff, some people do all of it, some people do only some of it. Like, it's just, I like freedom. That's just me. Why do you trust things for one group of people if you trust them on things for another group of people? Why do you trust things for one group of people if you trust them on things for another group of people? Okay, you can correct that. That was okay. I was so confused.
Seem to make you slightly more reasonable than the other child sexual mutilation advocates. But upon further evaluation, it actually makes your position even more incoherent, if that's possible. After all, the very medical establishment that you trust implicitly when it comes to puberty blockers also says that hormones and surgeries can be life-saving medical interventions for children.
They can.
So why do you trust them on the blockers, but not on the hormones and surgeries?
You say that taking 2 ibuprofen will alleviate your migraine as adults. Why would you then not give a child 2 ibuprofen as well? Yeah, we have like same drugs, different dosages. Kids and adults have different like development stages. We do not give kids even the same dosage of fucking Robitussin as we do for adults. Yeah, this is how all medicine works, Matt.
Or let's be very generous, catastrophic.
Like, do you think Matt gives like his kids like fucking like 4 ibuprofen when they say they have a headache?
Blockers, hormone surgeries, they're all part of the same process.
Or whatever
medical, affirmation.
The adult dosages. I think it's 4.
What you're saying is that you agree with step 1.
I try not to take ibuprofen too much.
But you think they're wrong about steps 2 and 3. This might not be an insurmountable logical problem for you, except that the only reason you agree with step 1 is simply because
I really hope Hunter
you're taking
Avalon,
their word for it.
Does a response to this, because this is like fucking Neanderthal logic.
But why don't you believe the rest of the story they tell? And if you don't, then have you considered that your skepticism should be more consistently applied? Third, finally, have you thought about just using your common sense?
What a fucking monster.
Has that
I think
thought
I've
occurred to
heard
you?
that too.
You tried to rely on studies, that blew up in your face. You want to appeal
I mean,
to
he also
authority,
thinks
except
that like
even you
child
can't figure out
pregnancy
whether
is
you
bad
should trust
because
these authorities or not.
only if the child
You're all
isn't
kinds
then
of confused.
married
You
to
don't know
like
which
the
way is up,
adult
which
who
way
got
is
them
down.
pregnant. So
Maybe consider applying your own.
he's got
mental
quite a few
faculties
yikesy
to
opinions.
This situation. Here's a very simple question.
For real.
Does it make sense to you?
No, I wouldn't wish
Does it
that
actually make
on
sense?
them. God
that a
forbid.
young
Matt
boy
seems like
might, in some sense,
Matt absolutely
be a
beats his
girl
kids.
somehow,
Absolutely.
necessitating the use of chemical castration drugs to suppress some of the physical effects of male puberty. Does that proposition make sense?
Yes.
Does it make
I didn't listen to
sense
anything.
take a
I'm not
boy
going
who is
back.
male and try to alter,
Whoa,
him in some-
whoa, Matt, did you just whoa. I think Matt just gave up the game. He just identified a boy who would be a man, and the difference between them being a man and male. We got him. Ladies and gentlemen, we got him. He understands that there's a difference.
some way in an effort to make him into, or make it appear as though he has been made into.
Even better.
something he can never
That's
be.
the best timeline.
Does it make sense to medically affirm
How do
the
I switch to
boy's
that timeline?
confusion, rather than trying to treat and heal the confusion? I think you know that it doesn't. I think you're smart enough to know that it doesn't.
Did he? I need to know.
At least I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt on that point. A benefit that you perhaps haven't earned.
Let's
But
see.
you have earned your turn today, being, of course, canceled. And that'll do it for this portion of the
I
show.
am
As we move over to
so
the members block.
curious.
Hope to see you there. If not, talk to you tomorrow. Godspeed.
Oh, shut up, Matt. No, he hasn't yet. He really needs to. He really should, like. I mean, I'm watching it, but like, absolutely. He should absolutely show up to this. I would recommend it. If I was his producer, which I'm not, I'd be like, you're doing a response to this, pal. But you know the thing that they tell, like at the end of all YouTube videos where they tell you to like click on one of these like things to watch more videos. Yeah, I've been meaning to film one of those. So that's what I was doing. I was just setting it up to film one.